I have been blessed with a very interesting welding career. Got out of welding school, went to work on nuclear powerhouses, shifted gears from that industry to aerospace maintenance with Delta Airlines. Soon after that, started teaching and certifying welders for Delta Airlines, got my CWI, my senior CWI. I got to work for 5 years as a metallurgical lab analyst, went back to managing the welding program, got into thermal spray testing, and then along the way started weldingtipsandtricks.com and Welding Tips and Tricks YouTube channel and weldmonger.com, my online welding store, which is how I make my living today. It's been a very interesting career. I've done some interesting work, and I'm very blessed and very fortunate. I've had a whole lot of time to think over the past year, being diagnosed with leukemia, and this whole last year has been full of chemo treatments, bone marrow transplant, getting poked 1,000 times, and just all the stuff that goes along with that. But I'm right here in front of you today telling you I'm a blessed man. I count it all a blessing. I'm in a good spot. I'm feeling good. I responded well to the treatments. I've still got a few to go. But I want to talk today about something I've been thinking about lately. Is something simple, but it made a huge difference for me, and that was buying my first TIG welding machine. And that was a long time ago. That was around 1993. And here's how that happened. I didn't just decide to buy a TIG welding machine one day. It kind of happened as a result of a wake-up call, a call from my credit union that said, "Hey, Mr. Collier, you are overdrafted. You don't have any money in your checking account." Well, what about my savings? You don't have any money in your savings because we just dinged your savings account. Now we'd like to ding your credit card. Okay, wake up call. And what way that happened was that I took a large pay cut to go to work for the airline. I was a pipe fitter, a union pipe fitter, but I took at that time, it was a good $7 an hour, pay cut. I went from like 18 an hour to 11, basically. And I knew that going in, I'm not whining or anything. I calculated it and I thought, well, it'll be worth it because I'll get pay raises, I'll have benefits, 401k, and all the things that come along with a corporate job, like for Delta. And so I knew I could weather the storm, or so I thought. And I made it up with overtime. But then the Gulf War hit, and then there was no overtime. They whacked overtime. And so, I'm making not much money. And I never have been one to spend much money. I mean, I always lived well beneath my means, but I just wasn't making enough money. 2 kids, there was a time back in that time period, it seemed like I was buying a gallon of milk every day. I had worked a shutdown right before going to Delta, worked 7/12s for a few months. So I put away some money, but then most of that went for a down payment on a house. And so here I was, no money in my bank account. So there's no way I was going to ask any relatives for any money or any help or anything like that. So I checked around and I wound up getting a part-time job at a job shop that was near my home. And so every day after work, put my 8 hours in at Delta, I would go work there. It's kind of a sheet metal fab shop, but they did all kinds of other things. Furniture stripping, tables, ornamental aluminum work for Krispy Kreme donuts, stainless steel cooling troughs for automotive trim extrusions, and just odds and ends. I got a lot of good experience there. And, while I was there, something that the owner said really stuck with me. And he was buying equipment, used equipment from Lockheed, which was nearby. And he bought about a 20-foot press brake, and he bought a welding machine. It was a like new Miller ABP 330, 3 something. I don't remember, but it came from their R&D department. It was like new. And here's what I remember him saying. He said, "Here's the reason I love buying welding machines, because you see that press brake? I paid about $30,000 for that used. I can get about $100 an hour shop rate when I'm using that $30,000 press brake. When I'm using this $800 welding machine here, I can also get $100 an hour shop rate. It's a screaming deal." And that really stuck with me. So I worked with that guy for a year or two, uh, stopping off every day after work, making less money than I was with Delta, but it was money. It got me out of the hole, got me solvent again, put away a little bit of money, and much appreciated money there. But I had to be away from my family a lot, and kids at home, and ball games, soccer, all the things that go along with having a family. It was stretched kind of thin doing that moonlighting and all that. Like, so I found out through the grapevine at work that some engineers there had started a small repair station, an FAA repair station, where they repaired aluminum prop spinners. And they were looking for welders there at work who were certified that could do some minor weld repairs on those prop spinners. And so they told me, hey, if you got a welding setup in your garage, we'll feed you some work here. And so I did the math, and they were paying about $40 per spinner. Took you about 30 minutes, way less than an hour to do one spinner. And with minor repairs, most of it was just like stop drill, 3/8 long crack, burr it out, clean it, weld it, blend it off, die check it, and return it. And that wasn't much more to it than that. And so I did the math and it was like, man, $40 a spinner or $11 an hour punching the clock for this guy over here and being away from home. And I could weld those spinners at night when the kids went to bed. And so just a no-brainer. And so I was so used to welding with a Miller Synchrowave 250. That's what Delta had kind of standardized on. That there was really no other choice for me to get. I was like, that's the welding machine I'm going to get. And there really wasn't much of a selection anyway. Like, I'm not even sure if the Miller Econo TIG had even come along at that point. It may have been, but it wouldn't have been a good enough machine for doing those jobs anyway. I needed a really light amp startup to do the thin aluminum and taper off without leaving crater cracks and things like that. So I stepped out there and I bought a Miller Synchrowave 250, running gear, Dynaflux water cooler, water-cooled CK torch, and a dual flow meter. And I believe all of that, ready to weld, with a bottle of argon, was probably around $3,000 or a little bit less. And which is crazy because you can get a better setup today for less than that. But that's all that was available at the time. And that machine did me a good job. So I bought that setup and I started doing those prop spinners, and that worked out great. I was home instead of at that guy's shop. I was working half the time for twice the money because I had my own welding machine, so I had a welding table, an end grinder, and some clamps and some hand tools, and that's really what I got started with, and it was working out great. And then that work kind of started to dry up a little bit because they were trying to pull it in house and get welders to come by their shop and do the welding to keep from transporting parts. But it got me started, and then out of the blue, someone came along and said, hey, I've got this part that I took to another welding service, and they just cobbled it up. This part, it was actually a sewer crawler, a remote sewer tractor, an inspection tractor. So it had a motorized body with tractor tracks on it, and then a camera attached to it with fiber optics, and it was for inspecting sewer systems. And that's about all I know about it. But I do know, it was about 18 inches long, carbon steel tubing, and it had all kinds of parts welded on it. Some of them were 303 free machining stainless. Some of them were 12L14 free machining steel. And whoever they took it to didn't know how to deal with those steels, with the free machining stuff. And it just was all undercut, cracked, ate up. He said, man, we got to take this to a trade show. And can you fix this? It's got to go to electroless nickel plating first. And this is going to look horrible if I have this thing plated. So I said, sure. And I ground out all the welds. I re-welded everything. And on the welds that had 303 stainless to carbon, I had some Hastelloy W filler wire that I bought as scrap. And so I re-welded everything, made it look as good as I could, turned it in a day, gave it back to him, and he was tickled with it. And I got all of his work from then on. And we did hundreds of those sewer crawler tractor things, hundreds of them. I used to love doing those things because it was pay for a vacation for me and my family. You know, I was in a position when I was teaching and certifying, I didn't get overtime. I did, and then gradually another machine shop heard of me, and these are mom and pop machine shops I'm talking about. They had an owner and maybe one helper, part-time helper, and they did not have a dedicated welder. And I think that's a common thing for a small machine shop. Somebody's starting off with a machine shop in their garage. They might be able to weld, but if they get some high-end parts, some expensive parts that they don't want to take a chance on, they don't want to take a chance on them not looking good when they're done. They want to deliver a nice looking product. Then you, if you're a good welder, you have your own stuff, you can get that work. I did anyway. I didn't even try to get it. Now, part of it was due to the fact that I had a network. I worked around a bunch of people that were machinists, mechanics, welders, and it's a lot of side hustle going on back in my days, early days with Delta like that. And so, you know, somebody would hear that I did welding on the side, and then I'd get their work. And so I wound up getting 3 main machine shops, and I was doing their work intermittently, and it almost was more than I could keep up with at times. And most of the time it was great, though. Most of the time it turned into be quite a extra income for me. Put a little money away, put a little bit more in my 401k, you know, things like that. Help me get a new refrigerator when I needed it instead of having to dig into savings, or, you know, again, take family vacations. And it was just super nice when I'd get paid a couple $1,000 for a, you know, order of those crawlers, and I wasn't, you know, I hadn't saved up that money for vacation, and there it was. And so we could go on vacation, and it was super for me. But really the best thing about it was I learned more in doing a side hustle for myself than I could have imagined. You know, I learned things like, you know, how to deal with free machining steels like 303 stainless, 12L14 carbon steel. I learned how to make repairs. I learned how to, you know, make a quick fixture. I mean, heck, I even made a welding lathe out of a 10-speed bicycle. In fact, I'll try to clip that in right here for those of you watching this on video, to do some of the parts that I got from one of these mom and pop machine shops. And so, learned a little bit about bidding jobs and how businesses work and things like that. And so, honestly, it turned into what you're seeing today. Now, here I am doing a podcast here, sponsored by my store, weldmonger.com, the Weldmonger store. I sell welding supplies. I didn't at first. I started off with just a website, seeing what I could do with that. It got traction, and I was just writing articles. I started the website. I started Welding Tips and Tricks in 2007, almost 20 years ago now. I started it because Delta had filed bankruptcy. They were cutting benefits. They were cutting pension. And I thought, I got to have a plan B, some kind of exit strategy, because this thing here, I thought I was going to get a nice pension. I thought I was going to work 30 years and retire and get a nice pension. And the game has changed. So I need to, you know, I got to make a move here. And so I started Welding Tips and Tricks, and I started the YouTube channel. And then eventually, just in a few years, I was able to retire from Delta. I came up with the TIG finger. Was my invention, my product. I got a patent on it, and now I've got a trademark on it, and still fighting the knockoffs and people that think they can call their thing the TIG finger. But hey, that's part of it. It started with buying the welding machine because it just taught me so much, and I had a lot to talk about, and I had a lot of content to shoot. Even after I retired, I was doing parts for a machine shop, and I would film doing the parts. It was so much more interesting than just welding a coupon together. You know, there's something to be learned from that too. I've done my share of that, but buying that welding machine opened so many doors, more than I even realized probably. And so now here I am. My family has all been able to work within this business. So we've all got a livelihood from the Weldmonger store. We have good rapport, good lifestyle, good flexibility. You know, nobody's a bazillionaire, but it's good, honest living. And, you know, it's fulfilling to know that I'm still making content, and I've got a whole lot more content to make. By the way, I've got a whole series, basically a curriculum designed for welding students, and I think it's going to be pretty awesome. But anyway, I've got things working. I'm working on things behind the scene to contribute to the welding community, whether they make any money or not. I'm just doing them because I want to keep contributing. So back to square one here. Let me land the plane here. I decided to buy that welding machine out of necessity, really because I had got a part-time job, and then that wore thin on the family. I bought the welding machine because it was a better arrangement than moonlighting. And then I did a bunch of work that I learned a ton for, and then I started a website, which turned into an invention that I could sell on my store. And now I sell lots of other welding supplies on my store, like tungsten, filler metal, gloves, and in addition to the TIG finger, welding helmets, welding machines. Now, let me land the plane really here. The point I wanted to make is that if you are a welder, if you're working as a W-2 welder, like I did for many years, and you have a spot in your garage, you can get started in a side hustle today way cheaper than you could even 30-something years ago when I did it. Now I sell primarily prime weld TIG welders and that CK MT200 TIG welder. And the reason I only sell two different brands, there's probably other good options out there, but these two brands are good solid machines with great customer service. When you have a problem, it gets taken care of. Now, I will say that I will go to bat for you, or my son-in-law Garrett will go to bat for anybody that buys a machine and has a problem with it. But we haven't had to go to bat. The companies themselves immediately have taken care of any problems that we've had. And we've had very few problems to start with. But any problems we've had, let's say a machine is, foot pedal's not working right. Boom, new foot pedal shipped. Arc start not working right. Machine dead on arrival. It happens sometimes. Boom, ship a new machine within days. Some companies, they might have a 5-year warranty, but they might keep your machine for 3 months trying to fix it, and you pay shipping both ways, things like that. So anyway, these two companies, the reason they're both solid machines, and you can get started with, like, say, for instance, the Prime Weld 325 would have done absolutely anything that Syncrowave did for me. I would have plenty of amperage, low end arc start, pulse, which the Syncrowave didn't have, but I could have started a side hustle. I could have even almost done everything with the 225, which is really inexpensive. It's less than $900 for a welding machine that you could start a side hustle with. There was only 2 jobs that I took on that I think I would have had trouble doing with the 225, and that's because of the low ends. One of them was like a 20 thousandths thick beverage container. I'll talk about that in another podcast. And the other was the aluminum prop spinners, because some of those were really thin aluminum, and you needed to really taper off to almost nothing to prevent leaving a crater. But other than that, I could have done everything that I ever took on with the 225, especially those sewer crawlers. So anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but if you're thinking about starting a side hustle, if you're thinking about getting your own welder in your garage, there's some really good, affordable options today. And I highly recommend Prime Weld as that. If you need super portability, fan on demand, and a 5 amp start, the CK MT200 is a great machine too. I want to wrap it up by saying again that I've had a wonderful welding career. I feel super blessed, and I pray and hope the same for you. I hope that God shines his favor on you the way I feel like he has on me. We'll see you next time. Hey, I hope you'll take us up on our free welding guides. The newest one is a How to TIG Weld Aluminum workbook with plenty of links to plenty of videos. You'll find the link in the description, or just do a quick Google search for free Weldmonger workbooks. I hope you'll shop weldmonger.com for tungsten, filler metal, welding machines, etc. I'll also put that link in the description. Thanks for your support.